And we continue at 1:05 in the afternoon on the Jon Phillips Show. And a special welcome to all the John Cobalt listeners who are now with us. Mr. Randy Wings in New Mexico.
John, first it was stealing all the copper wire and shutting off all the lights. Then it was all the spray painting. And the latest thing to be going on at the 6th Street Bridge is loads and loads of illegal fireworks shows.
Because why not make it the 4th of July every day?
That is L.A.
Who was it? Ronald Reagan, who said that for Republicans, every day is the 4th of July, and for Democrats, every day is April the 15th. Maybe we're making new Republicans in Los Angeles. I don't know. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. You can follow him on X at Flash Report, and you can subscribe to him on Substack over at So Does It Matter, where there is a lot of great content regarding California politics, California government, elections. Everything that you're interested in is over there. Jon Fleishman is the editor over at So Does It Matter, and he is kind enough to join us this afternoon. Jon, welcome.
Welcome. I was just listening to your comment about whether or not we're maybe getting some taxpayers to become Republican in Los Angeles. I don't know if there's any left. So, at this point, all the taxpayers are fleeing to Texas and Florida and Idaho and everyone's moving in from Illinois and New York and places to us, just what we need.
Well, maybe you're on to something, because what's the saying? Well, the last one out, please turn off the lights. And now that all the copper wire has been stolen, the lights have been turned off.
Now it's fireworks, right? So they're down to the bottom of the barrel. So
well, after they get rid of all the fireworks, we're going to have to try to get some fire by slamming two stones together.
Yes, it's no bueno. So
super old school. All right. Well, let's get to the Axios report over the weekend that said that Nancy Pelosi is saying all kinds of nice things. I know it was Valentine's Day, but apparently Gavin Newsom was her Valentine's, where she was traveling to Germany with him and talking about what a wonderful governor he is and what a great presidential candidate he would make, how presidential he is and everything that he does. And it's not common for her to heap that kind of praise on a candidate in a Democratic primary when it really hasn't been resolved. But it looks like she's buying stock early in Gavin Newsom. Does that surprise you to see that?
Well, it doesn't surprise me at all. What did they say in the article? That he's a fangirl of Newsom? There's an ultimate irony of you having me on this program to talk to you about the relationship between Nancy Pelosi and Gavin Newsom, because if I had a radio show and I was going to have a guest on that could talk about the relationship between those two, this would be turned around and I would be interviewing you, because nobody has done more of a deep, I'm telling you, nobody's done more of a deep dive about Nancy Pelosi and her connections going back 3 generations than this. But this is no big surprise. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is in the apex of her years. She's very, very old. And, for her to see a mayor of San Francisco, be a former mayor of San Francisco, become the president of the United States would just be a dream come true. I don't think in her final years she's really seeing herself as some sort of like a former president or a former speaker would be. I need to magnanimously step back and wait at the national convention and see who the delegates bring me. I think that she very much would like to see her friend. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, John, but I believe that a lot of the people that helped Nancy in her career are the same group of people that have helped Gavin in his career.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. She came from Leo McCarthy in San Francisco, and he came from Willie Brown. And those two worlds certainly interact with each other on occasion, but they didn't come from the exact same political machine as people frequently assume that they did. That being said, she likes to tell people that she has known Gavin Newsom since before he was born, because one of Paul's relatives married one of Gavin's relatives, and the families were close to one another in that regard. But politically speaking, there are people in that town that she is closer to than Gavin Newsom. I think a big part of it is a slam on Kamala. I think that she is tipping her hand that the Democratic Party would be nuts if they nominated Kamala again, who's currently leading in the polls. And Nancy has never liked her. She endorsed Terrence Hallinan over Kamala Harris when they ran against each other for DA in San Francisco. And certainly when she pushed Joe out of the race, she did not want Kamala to be the nominee. She wanted to go to an open convention at the DNC, and Grampy Joe got back at her by endorsing Kamala before they could organize some kind of election at the convention.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would also say that I think support for Gavin Newsom from Nancy Pelosi, other than maybe the angle you just brought up, doesn't really bring a whole lot to Newsom. But for him, what would have been annoying would be for the former Speaker, of the House from San Francisco to support one of his opponents. And so I do think that it's helpful in that regard. I also think she's in a hurry to make an endorsement because I think all of these Democrats are very, very anxious to do what they can to try to create a lame duck situation for President Trump. His administration couldn't come to a close soon enough for any of them. So, they're busy wanting to play out the 2028 primary right here in 2026. So.
And her daughter's running for state senate. And if her daughter's running for state senate, Gavin theoretically can do things to help her in that race. And if you're Nancy Pelosi, maybe that's what you care about more than the larger issue of who the Democratic nominee is going to be, collecting chits for your daughter.
That's entirely true? Or maybe it could just be that there's this old as hell woman that is in her apex of her career and is thinking I better make an endorsement before I'm not around to make one. So,
that's very true. Speaking of women in that position, Hillary Clinton over the weekend said that the Democratic Party
that's a good transition.
has gone totally nuts on immigration, and that mass immigration has not been good for the country. And Democrats need to recognize that. Otherwise, they're going to continue to lose elections. At the same time, Barack Obama went on a podcast and said that if Democrats think that running big cities and allowing homeless people to live on the streets is going to help them win elections, they're nuts too. What do you make of these two bold-faced names in the Democratic Party taking positions on issues that have been antithetical to the positions that Democratic mayors have been taking and Democratic politicians have been taking for years and years and years? Do you think this is about the midterms, about the upcoming presidential election, or maybe something else?
I think it's about the midterms and it's about the upcoming presidential election. I think that this is how far left the modern Democrat Party has moved, when Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton are actually trying to call for some level of restraint. I mean, they just saw Harris lose the presidency to Donald Trump with swing voters who were aghast that Harris would actually, in a televised interview, talking about the need for the state of California to fund transgender surgeries for California inmates, right? And so at a certain point, I think these folks who have been around the block and they understand, one from winning twice, one from a painful loss, understand that you can't win America if you don't have the middle. And so the one big, I guess I'd say Achilles heel that the Democrats have is that no matter how challenging things are for Republicans right now and all of that, at the end of the day, the Democratic Party has moved so far left that when you're left with a binary choice come election time, that's the reason why Republicans probably keep the Senate. That's the reason why, if there's a fighting chance to keep the House, and ultimately in 2028, why Republicans, I think, have a really good shot at keeping the White House. It's because it's not like Republicans have moved to the right and Democrats have moved into the middle to kind of like seize that territory. Instead, they moved even further to the left. And so to the extent that you have some percentage of these voters who are kind of in the middle and they're looking for, where to go, it's a lot easier to move a little to the right than it is to dive off into San Francisco left. And so, I guess that's what I think. I think that they're trying to say, look, we've run the national map before, and crazy doesn't win the White House. But, I could be wrong. That's my take. What's your take, John?
Well, I think that this could be some kind of cue to Democratic primary voters to be real hesitant to nominate another California Democrat to be the nominee, because we know what images exist on Skid Row in Los Angeles, from the Tenderloin in San Francisco, from Oakland, from all points in between. And pictures are hard to debate because pictures are pictures. Yeah. So unless you claim that they're doctored up by AI, which anyone who lives here knows that's the reality of what we live with. And there are two other issues that I think are going to be very difficult for Gavin Newsom to get around. And that is, we're hosting the World Cup. We're hosting the Olympics. The world is going to come here. People who are not necessarily political are going to walk the streets of Los Angeles. They're going to stay in our hotels. They're going to experience what life is like being here. And I think that for a lot of them, they're going to be horrified because they have a certain idea in their head as to what California is like. And I'm sure it's glamorized. And they're going to get here and they're going to experience a reality that is in no way related to what they think of when they think of the state of California. And that's going to end up on the sports pages. That's going to end up on the sports networks. That's going to end up on the World Cup coverage, on the Olympics coverage. And I don't see how you contain that.
I mean, I remember back to when was it the president of China that came to San Francisco, and so they kind of like shoved everything that was messy and dirty in the city under covers and beautified the city for his visit. And I was thinking in Los Angeles, you'd almost have to go to pick some city like, say, Montebello. That's a random city in Los Angeles, and be like, what can we pay you to just take everything? And we're just going to shove it all into your city for 3 weeks of soccer and 3 weeks of the Olympics. Because to your point, John, and to all the listeners on the program who are from Los Angeles, it is just a mess. I mean, my favorite thing that I like to tell people, because they look back at you and they say, what are you talking about? The city of Los Angeles has not repaved a single street in over a year. And when you think about what are the basic things that you expect from your city government, and then on top of it, the whole parade of terribles, I do think this is all going to end up on television. It's all going to be a reminder that California, it's just a cesspool. The policies here, and, anyways, Gavin Newsom doesn't really focus on that anyway, because he's been busy going to Brazil, going to Switzerland, going to Germany. He was just in the United Kingdom. So he's already kind of conceding that this entire mess that's in California is simply going to be somebody else's problem.
Well, let's shift gears and talk about the gubernatorial race, because right now, in the most recent polls that I have seen, 2 Republicans are finishing first and second. The sheriff in Riverside County, Chad Bianco, and former Fox News host Steve Hilton. There are a bunch of Democrats in the race. They're all bunched together between third and I guess however far you want to go down the list. And right now, there has been no Democrat to break out as the clear favorite, as the one who has the best shot of making the November ballot. We're seeing some signs that some of the bold-faced names in the Democratic Party are willing to get behind one candidate, where Adam Schiff, the senator from California, came out and endorsed Eric Swalwell over the weekend. And Axios also reported that it's highly likely that the former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, will do the same. Do you see Eric Swalwell as the horse that they decide to ride?
My personal opinion is no. My personal opinion is that, so when we look at them consolidating, the biggest names are not politicians. The biggest names are the union bosses that you don't know the names of, that populate the boardroom of the California Teachers Association, the Service Employees International Union. These are massive, big spending entities that will spend, as far as I'm concerned, the CTA has mortgaged their building before to have an influence in politics. So these people will spend, I believe, 9 digits, over $100 million if necessary, over the next 5 months to do two things. They will pick one candidate, and I'll explain why I don't think it's Swalwell in a minute, and they will pick one Republican to sink, because my prediction is the top vote getter will be a Republican, but it'll only be one of them, and that's because they're going to do what shifted last year, where they're going to run ads all over the place, boosting the Democrat they want and putting in those ads as the opponent, the Republican that they want to run into the general election. And the reason I don't think they're going to get behind Swalwell is these unions expect complete and total fealty. They are not interested in a Tom Steyer who would not be beholden to them. They're not interested in a Matt Mahan who wouldn't be beholden to them. And frankly, they're not going to be interested in Katie Porter or Eric Swalwell, because these are people that got into their positions without any help from the union. And my insider favorite is, you're going to laugh when I tell you this, I wouldn't be surprised if all of a sudden out of nowhere they dropped $40 million in boost Tony Thurmond, the state superintendent of public construction, out of nowhere, because they created him and they own him. And the entire culture of corruption in California depends on them having a governor who is their bitch. I mean, literally, they need a governor who's like, what do you need me to do? When do you want me to do it? And I'll give Eric Swalwell some credit, because while I don't like him and I don't like his politics, he's not really anybody's bitch, right? He's his own guy. He's his own upstart. And frankly, leaning on him is more likely to get him to oppose you than to support you. And I kind of like Steyer. And so my prediction is that that's how this is going to go down. They're going to pick someone like Thurmond, who I think is completely their tool. And that's because the field is so lackluster that they can literally create a candidacy in the last 2 months, 3 months, because there's no clear frontrunner in the field. How's that for a bold prediction?
Well, that is a bold prediction, but so far they're scattershot, where you have the California Nurses Association behind Steyer, you had the firefighters who just got behind Swalwell, Antonio Villaraigosa has a list endorsing him, Porter has a list endorsing her. You're right that the SEIU and Lorena Gonzalez and the CTA haven't picked their candidate yet, and those are certainly the big dogs. But the Nurses Association, they were the ones that got Jerry Brown elected. Yeah, but these days, I mean, they're all about single payer healthcare, and they're interested in so I'm not saying that they don't. It's an interesting choice for them, because they've picked the only candidate that doesn't need a dime of their money. So they we'll see what happens with them. And again, my theory is that the unions you just talked about, the Labor Federation unions, the CTA, the SEIU, I think they're all going to be coordinating, and they're going to land behind one person, because anybody listening to this program, I am telling you, the amount of money they have to bring to bear is vast. I mean, it's not even funny how much. I'm talking over $100 million that they have to spend to make sure. And the governor's race for them is all over in June, right? They're going to spend it all to make sure that, kind of like the way that Adam Schiff spent all that he was going to spend, in June, and it was over. That's going to be the case here. I don't know if anybody's ever tried flipping a coin at home and letting it land on the ground. Ask yourself how many times you'd have to flip that coin before it would stand on its edge, because that's about the odds of two Republicans going to the general. And that's because even the two Republicans don't even have enough money to talk to California Republicans and tell them who they are. There's 5 million California Republicans. We have more Republicans in California than any state in the country, and talking to them is expensive. So, the reality is it's like with Steve Garvey. Garvey spent hundreds of thousands of dollars advertising for himself, and then Adam Schiff spent millions of dollars, maybe even over $10 million. All right.
Helping.
We're going to have to leave it there. Jon Fleishman is the guest. You can follow him on X at Flash Report, and you can subscribe to his Substack, So Does It Matter. Excellent coverage of California politics. Jon, thanks so much for joining us. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, if you're in Central California and want to listen to us on the weekends, that's easy to do.
We do a special wrapped up edition of the Fix California Hour for our friends at KMJ 580 AM 105.9 FM in the Central Valley. And that is now going to air Saturdays at noon. So if you're driving through the Central Valley, you're going through Fresno, you're waiting for that high-speed rail to get constructed, so you're pitching up a tent right outside of Wasco, well, you can listen to the Fix California Hour every Saturday from noon to 1 on KMJ. Go to the website, KMJnow.com.
800-222-5222 is a telephone number. We know in California that insurance company after insurance company has moved out of the state and announced that they're no longer selling new policies here. The insurer of last resort is the California Fair Plan. That's supposed to be if no one else will touch you, there's going to be an entity who will be willing to sell you a policy. All of the reforms that we've seen come from the California Department of Insurance's office, and our insurance commissioner, Ricardo Lara, has been intended to depopulate the plan. Well, as it turns out, it's not working.
In fact, the numbers are out, and the Fair Plan since 2019, when Ricardo Lara took office, has quadrupled.
Trailblazing is rarely comfortable, yo.
Well, nothing's easy for you, pal.
For more, here's ABC 10 in Sacramento.
Is California's home insurance crisis stabilizing? Well, if you look at the latest fair...
It is not. Story over.
Yeah, you could really do this one quickly, couldn't you?
Well, we got 3 hours to fill.
If you look at the latest Fair Plan numbers, it appears many homeowners are still...
It's like how stand-ups have a really hard time doing radio, because stand-ups, you have a tight 5 or a tight 15, and you got to do 3 hours of this every single day.
It's a beast that constantly needs to be fed.
That hasn't stopped program directors from constantly trying to put comedians on the air to be like, try a radio show. You'll be great at it.
It appears many homeowners...
Not our current program director.
It appears many homeowners are still relying on the state's fire insurer of last resort. I want to bring in ABC 10's Becca Habegger, who's joining us now with a deeper look and how more changes are possibly on the way. Right, Becca?
Yeah, Alex, California's insurance commissioner has implemented reforms to get people off the Fair Plan.
And they have not worked.
I'm telling you, I know people who are buying condos in cities, not in Lake Tahoe, not in Big Bear, not in areas with extreme fire risk, but cities where they're around a bunch of other condo buildings and homes, and they're ending up on the Fair Plan.
I may be criticized and dragged through the mud for it and get my wig snatched, as the gay guys say.
To this day, the best use of AI of all time.
And back into the regular market. We've been reporting on that process for years. But some state lawmakers and the commissioner himself say more work needs to be done.
More work needs to be done. His term's almost over. He's going to be unemployed in months.
This guy is counting down the days until he gets to leave.
The California Fair Plan is the state's high-cost, bare-bones insurer of last resort. It's funded with a pool of money from insurance companies, not taxpayers. It's intended...
Although... Ricardo Lara put up reforms that now say if the Fair Plan goes bankrupt, the insurance companies get to pass on that cost to guess who? The ratepayers and the taxpayers.
Because why not?
It's intended for when other insurance companies won't cover your house for fire.
So what is the state doing about this outdated and expensive Fair Plan?
Outdated is true. The Fair Plan was created in the 1960s when no one wanted to insure Watts after the riots.
And then somehow it turned to places that burn down every few years.
I'm very kind of sketched.
I have been covering this story since 2019, when a growing number of homeowners began getting dropped or non-renewed by their insurance company and had to turn to the FAIR Plan.
Notice how this was happening just around the same time that Ricardo Lara took office.
Everything just kind of went to hell all at the same time.
Absolutely.
But we were celebrating because we had our first statewide gay.
I'll tell you, the California Press Corps really failed us on that one. They get so obsessed with the identity politics, they don't even bother to cover whether or not the person is competent enough to do the job.
At the time, in September 2019, the FAIR Plan had nearly 155,000 homeowner policies. That number has only grown, ballooning in September 2025 to 625,000 policies.
And by the way, that's now nearly a year after Ricardo Lara's plan that was supposed to allow the insurers to jack up their rates more quickly and get people off the FAIR Plan. And there's only been more people on the FAIR Plan.
And notice that no one is even willing to acknowledge that they need to recalibrate. They just want to keep doing what they're doing.
That's 4 times the number of policies in 2019.
How do we get back to being the insurer of last resort? And can we get back to being the insurer of last resort? I think that's really the open question.
That's FAIR Plan President Victoria Roach late last month speaking to the California Assembly Insurance Committee. She says they now
Isn't that the committee that Ricardo Lara routinely doesn't show up to?
Oh, yes. Well, he doesn't show up to a lot of things.
She says they now
He does show up to Pride and DJ Kitty Glitter on your dime.
And anytime there's a junket in Bermuda.
She says they now have just over 668,000 policies, about 43,000 more than in September.
Wait, it's gone up that much just in the last few months?
Good Lord.
I'd prefer to call the FAIR Plan California Safety Net rather than the insurer of last resort. Because I feel like the FAIR Plan is no longer the insurer of last resort.
Lawmakers and lobbyists alike expressed concerns that some homeowners are opting for the FAIR Plan in some lower risk areas because it's less expensive than policies offered by insurance companies in the regular so-called admitted market.
That's interesting. The rates have gotten so expensive, some people are saying, screw it, give me the worst policy possible just so I can check a box on the mortgage document.
Well, here's the thing. What we're learning from all of these fires is they're not going to pay you what they owe you. If they're going to pay you what they owe you, you're going to have to hire a lawyer and you're going to have to sue them. Well, if that's the case, if you know you're being forced to purchase a service that you can't use, then why not get the most bare bones one possible? Because if they're all useless, why pay for an expensive one?
Let's be reasonable. This is a debacle. This is wrong. We need to take care of the admitted market.
You cannot depopulate the FAIR Plan when somebody can go to the FAIR Plan policy, maintain the FAIR Plan policy for 30, 40 years because it is cheaper.
Roach agrees.
Our role is not to compete or replace admitted carriers.
Last year, the FAIR Plan filed a request with the California Department of Insurance to raise rates an average of 35.8%.
Oh, yeah. And guess who's going to greenlight that one?
He hasn't seen a rate hike that he doesn't love.
That request is still pending. It comes as many fixed-income homeowners on the FAIR Plan say their rates already feel unaffordable. Until more carriers in the admitted market return to writing more fully in the state, Insurance Committee Chair Assemblymember Lisa Calderon says the FAIR Plan needs to better serve its customers. That's why she and Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara have introduced AB 1680, a bill that, among other things, would require the FAIR Plan to offer full homeowners insurance coverage, not just fire coverage. A FAIR Plan spokesperson.
So they can have full coverage of things that they won't pay you for.
If you can't use it, why argue over all of these details?
They want to make the FAIR Plan as expensive, even though for a lot of people it's more expensive because you can't get it anywhere. For the places where it's less expensive because it's bare bones, we want to make sure that it is as expensive as all the other ones so people will be continued to get pushed out of the housing market.
A Fair Plan spokesperson told ABC 10 Monday they are reviewing AB 1680 and have no comment at this time. At the committee hearing, however, Roach said offering full coverage is possible but would be difficult.
So it's not that it can't be done. It's a huge undertaking that will take time and will take money. Back of the napkin math, we're saying 30 to 50% increase in our budget in order to write that policy.
AB 1680 may be heard in committee March 5th.
Fair Plan data show while the number of policies is still growing, the pace of growth slowed slightly last year compared to 2024.
That's not what Ricardo Lara sold us. He said we have to bend over backwards and give the insurance companies everything they need so they'll come back and we will depopulate the Fair Plan, and that is not happening.
Slowing the pace of growth is success to them.
There was a State of the City. I think Eric Garcetti's final State of the City as mayor of L.A. That was his big accomplishment on homelessness. He couldn't even fudge the numbers like Karen Bass, but he said the rate of growth is slowing.
I've received things on both ends.
Doing a bang-up job there.
The plan's president says she thinks a lot of that is because we're not seeing the bulk non-renewals that were coming out from the admitted market in recent years. We'll continue following these developments.
So there's the latest on the California Fair Plan. Get ready for it to get a hell of a lot more expensive.
Well, we know that nationally there's been a lot of reporting on deportations taking place thanks to ICE. We've also seen many people self-deport because they know that the government is cracking down on illegal immigration. Well, obviously, that's going to have all kinds of implications on other things. We've seen enrollment in schools in California in free fall, especially in big city school districts like LA and Oakland. We've also seen another fallout of what ICE is doing. And that is that in Los Angeles, the rent is starting to finally go down.
Slightly.
Well, it had been going way up for a very long time, and now it is starting to drop, especially in certain neighborhoods.
For more on a slight decrease in rental prices in Los Angeles, here's CBS LA.
Cost of living in Southern California is estimated around 50% higher than the national average, but there's...
You don't say.
Every time I walk outside my house, I'm reminded that we pay a fortune to live here.
I was on a walk this morning in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and what did I take a picture of? The gas station on Guadalupe where gas is $2.47.
I'm so jealous.
But there's one area we're seeing...
This is a true story. Last time we were here, my wife was driving around in my in-laws' car, and the tank wasn't even half empty. But that was such a good deal, we thought we'd go fill up.
But there's one area we're seeing some savings. Rental prices are down nearly 2% year over year.
2%? Oh, boy, I'm sure the kids can afford to move out of mom's now.
Swimming pools, movie stars.
Rental prices have been slowly dropping since 2022, and experts say for the first time in a while, more and more renters are holding the power.
So today we're going to package an order for our Ethiopian coffee.
Jonathan Kennard operates his own coffee roasting business, Coffee Del Mundo, out of a small warehouse in South LA.
I would imagine being an entrepreneur, launching your own company, there's a lot of stress financially.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
And with money tight, Kennard planned to stick it out in a studio apartment in downtown LA until his debts were paid off.
And what have you seen over time?
This is not a guy that's like, hey, I'm going to blow up any minute, so I'm going to get the big apartment.
And what have you seen over time with rental prices?
They've been crazy. I mean, since I've been here, it always seemed like rent was going up, and they want 2 or 3 times your amount of income.
But when Kennard inquired about the cost of moving from a studio to a 1-bedroom in his building, he was shocked at the response.
It was the same price for the 1-bedrooms as I've been paying for my studio, because every year the rent goes up. So at a certain point, if you don't reset, you're going to keep paying more, even maybe more than market rate at a certain point.
That's wild. It was more expensive for him to stay in his studio than to move into the same building for a 1-bedroom.
Hey, this guy was good to check the price.
So what were you able to get a 1-bedroom for?
I was able to get it for $19.50.
That's a deal?
I don't know about that, but if it's what he's paying for a studio, why not?
According to new data.
Wait, he was paying $19.50 for a studio?
And he's in South LA?
Oh, boy.
According to new data from Apartment List, the average cost of a one-bedroom in the LA metro area is now just over $1,800, down from $1,980 in the summer of 2022.
Yep, rents are definitely coming down.
Good Lord, how do any of us afford to live here?
That's a savings of 1.8% year over year and 8% from the peak.
So why is this happening?
It always comes down to supply and demand.
Rob Warnock is the lead economic researcher for Apartment List. He says LA had a strong construction pipeline from 2015 to 2022.
And then in 2022, we passed Measure ULA, and no one wants to build apartment buildings in LA anymore.
Boy, we have suicidal ideation when we vote, don't we?
And so that created a bunch of availability in the market and created supply for people to move into. Now, if you have a lot of new apartments coming online and you don't have a ton of people, wrestling to move into those apartments, landlords have no choice but to bring down their rents in an effort to attract new tenants.
Do you see this trend continuing with prices?
By the way, if it seems like some of the information being shared in this story is rudimentary, just remember that this is being broadcast in Los Angeles to a lot of LAUSD graduates.
Prices going down in 2026 as well?
2026 will probably be a similar year where we see rent growth maybe negative, at the very least, if it's positive, low in LA. But we do know that the construction industry as a whole hit kind of a zenith in 2022 and has been slowing down.
And again, that's because of Nithya Raman's Measure ULA. Now something she's running for mayor and says, I need to be mayor because we're not building apartment buildings anymore.
Well, we're not doing anything. We're not repaving streets. What was it that Jon Fleishman just said? We haven't repaved a street in over a year?
Well, that's by design. They're not repaving streets because of Measure HLA. That's the road diet bill that was put on the ballot in 2024. And the way this works is anytime the city of LA repaves a street, they have to do a road diet with bike lanes. And that will make the cost so prohibitive that they've just decided to let the streets rot.
Good thinking.
That will eventually catch up.
Here's the new rule. I don't care what the ballot measure is. If it has LA in the name, do not vote for it.
I'm pretty much a no across the board on all taxes and all bonds right now because I just don't trust these people to spend the money correctly.
How do you feel about kidney bills?
No.
That will eventually catch up to us.
Experts say now is the time to apartment shop, and renters may even have luck negotiating a lower rent than what's listed. Landlords typically like to keep vacancies less than 5%, and in December, vacancy rates in the LA area grew to 5.3%, according to Apartment List.
Especially when we're talking about the kind of professionally managed properties.
Kennard still can't believe he was able to upgrade without paying more.
I was like, well, what's a 2-bedroom like? I was like, oh, yeah, no, okay, we'll wait on the 2-bedroom, but...
You might have to sell a lot more coffee before that one, buddy.
He might have to compete with Juan Valdez.
For the 1-bedroom and on the higher floor, upgraded amenities like the kitchen and everything. So I was grateful. Definitely a blessing.
This guy's a real optimist. There are some people that would look at this and say, wow, you've been ripping me off for 10 years.
Not all SoCal areas are seeing rent relief. Rents rose or stayed flat in Orange, Ventura, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties.
But if you can get a deal, it feels so good.
Yes, $1,800 instead of $1,900. What a deal. What a steal.
Hey, this guy seems to be pleased. All right, well, put a tip in the tip jar the next time you get a cup of Java.